The concrete was cracked in 3 places, each fissure running parallel to the foundation like veins beneath skin. I marked them on my clipboard while the contractor watched from his truck, probably wondering why I was taking so long. That's the thing about building inspections. Most people think it's about passing or failing. They don't understand it's about seeing what's actually there. I've been a city building inspector for 11 years, long enough to know that every structure tells a story if you're willing to listen. Long enough to know that people lie about foundations, about load-bearing walls, about whether they pulled the proper permits, and long enough to know that if someone's hiding something in their construction project, they're probably hiding something elsewhere too. The October air had that sharp edge that makes you wish you'd grabbed a heavier jacket. I finished my notes and walked back to my truck, leaving the contractor to wonder whether he'd passed. He had, mostly. The cracks weren't structural, but I'd learned years ago that making people wait builds a certain kind of respect. My phone buzzed as I climbed into the cab. A text from Jennifer, my wife, asking when I'd be home. I glanced at the timestamp. 2:47 p.m. She knew my schedule. Tuesday afternoons I always had the Riverside development inspections, which meant I wouldn't be back until after 6. I'd told her this Sunday night when she asked about my week. I typed back, same as every Tuesday, around 6:30. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Okay, just checking. Just checking. As if my schedule changed day to day like hers did. Jennifer worked HR at Regional Medical Systems, one of those positions where everything was either urgent or could wait until next month. No in between. Her days were chaos. Mine were methodical. That was supposed to be what balanced us. I started the engine and pulled out onto Riverside Drive, watching the construction site shrink in my rear view. The next inspection was in 20 minutes across town, a residential addition that probably wouldn't pass. The homeowner had hired his brother-in-law instead of a licensed contractor, and brother-in-law had some creative ideas about electrical wiring. The radio played something forgettable. I switched it off and drove in silence, which was when I noticed the pattern. Jennifer's texts had been doing this thing lately, arriving at odd times, asking questions she already knew the answers to. Last Thursday, she'd asked what time I'd left for work, even though she'd been in the kitchen when I walked out. Sunday, she'd texted asking if I was at Home Depot, which I was, which she knew because I'd told her I needed drywall anchors. It was like she was confirming my location, building a timeline. People don't usually think like that unless they're trying to solve a problem or hide one. I turned onto Maple and found myself thinking about the Hendersons' divorce 3 years back. Tom Henderson had been a decent guy, worked at the water treatment plant, coached Little League. Then one day he started showing up to inspections distracted, forgetting which permits he'd filed, mixing up dates. Turned out his wife was seeing someone from her yoga class. Tom had known for months, but kept pretending everything was normal until the bank accounts were separated and the lawyer was paid. He'd told me about it over coffee after the divorce finalized. Said the weirdest part wasn't the betrayal. It was realizing he'd known something was wrong for a full year before he admitted it to himself. All those little signs he'd explained away. The changed passwords, the new interest in her appearance, the way she'd started asking about his schedule with a precision that felt less like caring and more like coordination. I pulled into the driveway of the residential addition and sat there for a moment, engine idling. Jennifer had changed her phone password 6 weeks ago. I'd noticed when she asked me to grab her phone from the counter and I'd tried to use the old code. She'd laughed it off, said she'd updated it after some security notification. Gave me the new one right away, which somehow made it seem less suspicious. But then, there was the gym membership she'd suddenly renewed after letting it lapse for 2 years. The new clothes that appeared in her closet, not expensive enough to be obvious but nicer than her usual Target runs. The way she'd started doing her hair differently on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the way she always asked about my Tuesday schedule. I turned off the engine and grabbed my clipboard. The homeowner was already opening the front door, eager to show me his brother-in-law's handiwork. I smiled and followed him inside, running through my mental checklist of code violations, while another part of my brain started building a different kind of list entirely. The inspection took 40 minutes. The wiring was worse than I'd expected. Wrong gauge wire, junction boxes mounted incorrectly, switches installed backwards. I marked it all down with the kind of clinical precision that makes people nervous. The homeowner's face fell as I explained what needed to be fixed. "But Kenny said he knew what he was doing," the homeowner protested. "He helped wire his buddy's garage." "Kenny needs to hire an electrician," I said, handing him the violation notice. "You've got 2 weeks to correct these items before I have to file a formal report." I left him standing in his unfinished addition, probably calling Kenny to ask why his shortcuts were going to cost an extra $3,000. Back in the truck, I opened my phone's calendar and scrolled backwards. Jennifer's gym sessions had started late August, every Tuesday and Thursday from 5:30 to 7 p.m., which meant she'd be there right now, according to her schedule. On impulse, I pulled up our cell phone account. We were on a family plan through my city employee discount, and checked the usage logs. It took 3 minutes of scrolling through the carrier's website before I found what I was looking for. Text messages, hundreds of them, but not to me. The number appeared over and over, clustering around Jennifer's gym nights and my Tuesday inspection afternoons. I didn't recognize it. I copied it and dropped it into a reverse lookup site, the kind investigators use when they're trying to identify witnesses. The name that came back was Tyler Monroe. I sat in that driveway for another 10 minutes, staring at the phone screen while the October sun dropped lower behind the unfinished addition. Tyler Monroe. I didn't know any Tyler Monroe. Jennifer had never mentioned a Tyler Monroe, but apparently Jennifer texted Tyler Monroe more than she texted me. I cleared my search history, habit from years of being careful with digital trails, and drove home with the radio off again, thinking about Tom Henderson and his year of willful blindness, thinking about all the questions Jennifer had been asking, thinking about Tuesday afternoons and Thursday evenings, and whether the gym she claimed to attend was actually within the 20-minute radius her location history suggested. Because that was the other thing about building inspections. Once you learn to look at foundations, you start seeing cracks everywhere. Jennifer's car was already in the driveway when I arrived. I checked my watch, 6:35 p.m. She'd said she was going to the gym until 7. I sat in my truck for a moment, considering whether to go inside and ask about it, then decided against it. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed my inspection clipboard and walked inside like every other Tuesday evening, calling out a greeting as I hung my jacket on the hook by the door. Jennifer appeared from the kitchen, hair dry, wearing the yoga pants and athletic top she'd apparently worn to a workout she'd left early. "How was your day?" she asked, the same question she always asked, like we were reading from a script neither of us had agreed to. "Long," I said. "Failed an inspection. Homeowner wasn't happy." "They never are," she said, and disappeared back into the kitchen. I stood in the hallway, listening to her open the refrigerator, close it, run water in the sink. The sounds of normalcy. The sounds of a marriage that looked fine from the outside, like a house with good curb appeal and rotting floor joists. Later that night, after dinner and television, and all the other rituals of pretending, I lay in bed next to Jennifer and listened to her breathe. She fell asleep quickly, like she always did. No guilt keeping her awake. No anxiety about whether I'd noticed anything wrong. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Tyler Monroe. Then I started planning. The thing about having access to city systems is that nobody questions why a building inspector needs to look up property records. It's literally part of the job. Commercial permits, residential zoning, contractor licenses, all of it's public information anyway, just buried in databases most people don't know how to navigate. Tyler Monroe owned 3 rental properties in the city and 1 commercial space he was apparently converting into office suites. All recently purchased, all leveraged with loans that would require steady income to maintain. I found his contractor license number, his business registration, even his vehicle registration. He drove a white Silverado with custom wheels and a vanity plate that said, "Built for you." I hated him immediately, but hate wasn't useful. What was useful was information, and I had plenty of time to gather it. Wednesday morning, I drove past Jennifer's gym. It was a small place, one of those boutique studios that offered yoga and Pilates and something called bar fitness that sounded like it was named by someone who'd never been to an actual bar. I didn't stop, just noted the location and checked it against her phone's location history. She'd been there exactly twice in the past month. Every other Tuesday and Thursday evening, her phone had pinged towers near the Riverside construction district, which was interesting because Tyler Monroe's current project, the office suite conversion, was right in the middle of that district. I drove past it on my way to my own inspections. 3-story brick building, probably built in the 50s, good bones but outdated systems. The kind of project that required constant permits, constant inspections, constant interaction with the city. The kind of project where a building inspector might legitimately need to review the work. I pulled into the parking lot and sat there for a moment, watching a white Silverado with custom wheels parked near the entrance. Built for you. I got out of my truck and walked across the lot slowly, my clipboard under my arm, every bit the bored city employee doing his daily rounds. The building's front door was propped open with a paint bucket. Inside, the smell of fresh drywall compound and sawdust. Voices echoed from somewhere on the second floor. I didn't go inside, not yet. Instead, I walked the perimeter, noting the dumpster placement, the electrical panels, the fire exits, building a mental map of the space and its vulnerabilities. Every structure has them. When I got back to my truck, I pulled up the permit history on my tablet. Tyler Monroe had filed for electrical, plumbing, and HVAC upgrades, all approved, all in progress. But he hadn't filed for the window replacement I could clearly see from the parking lot. That was interesting. I drove back to the office and spent the next hour cross-referencing permits against actual work. By lunch, I had a list of 6 violations, none of them catastrophic, but all of them requiring correction before final inspection. The kind of thing that could delay a project by weeks if someone decided to enforce them strictly. And I was planning to enforce them very strictly. That evening, Jennifer came home at 8 p.m., apologizing for being late, explaining that a situation at work had needed her attention. She smelled like vanilla body spray, not sweat. Her yoga pants were pristine. I nodded along to her story while I scrolled through the location data that showed her phone had spent the evening in the Riverside district, approximately 30 feet from where Tyler Monroe's Silverado had been parked, until 7:45 p.m. "Sounds stressful," I said. "You have no idea," she said, and went upstairs to shower. I stayed on the couch, reviewing the permit violations I'd documented. Each one carefully worded, technically accurate, impossible to dispute. The kind of thing that would make Tyler Monroe very, very nervous if it landed on his desk right before a potential sale or lease signing. But timing was important. Rush it, and they'd know someone was targeting them. Wait too long, and I'd lose the advantage. I needed more information first. Thursday, I called in a favor with Danny Ortiz, a guy who ran dispatch for a towing company that had contracts with several property management firms. Danny and I had gone to high school together, hadn't talked in years, but we'd been friendly enough back then. "Hey man, long time," Danny said when he picked up. "What's going on?" "Need some information," I said. "You guys tow for the Riverside District properties?" "Some of them. Why?" "Looking into a contractor who's been parking in fire lanes during his renovations. Want to confirm his vehicle details before I file a formal complaint." It was technically true. Tyler's Silverado had been parked partially blocking a fire lane twice in the past week. Not enough to cause problems, but enough to be documented if someone cared to notice. "What's the plate?" Danny asked. I gave him the vanity plate number. "Yeah, I've seen that truck," Danny said. "Guy's there all the time. Usually parks like he owns the place. Does he ever have passengers? There was a pause. You asking as an inspector or as something else? Just curious about traffic patterns, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Danny wasn't stupid. Look, man, I don't know what you're digging into, but yeah. Sometimes there's someone with him. Dark hair, professional looking. They leave together around 7, 8 at night. Dark hair, professional looking. Jennifer's description, exactly. Thanks, I said. I owe you one. You okay? Danny asked. Fine, I said. Just doing my job. I hung up before he could ask anything else. That night, Jennifer actually went to the gym. I knew because I drove past and saw her car in the lot, visible through the studio's front windows doing some kind of balance pose that probably had a Sanskrit name. She came home 90 minutes later, actually sweaty this time, and told me about her workout with the kind of detail that made it clear she wanted me to believe this one was real, which meant she knew the other ones hadn't been convincing enough. People only over-explain when they think they've been caught. I waited until the weekend to take the next step. Saturday morning, while Jennifer was getting her hair done, an appointment I knew about because she'd mentioned it 3 times, I drove to Tyler Monroe's current residence. He rented a townhouse in the newer development near the interstate, probably temporary housing while he flipped properties for profit. I didn't knock on his door or make contact. I just sat in my truck 3 spaces down and watched. After 40 minutes, Tyler emerged wearing running gear and headed toward the community trail. I waited until he was out of sight, then got out and walked past his townhouse slowly, noting the details. Ring doorbell camera, security system sticker in the window, 2 newspapers on the porch, which meant he didn't check his mail regularly. A window on the side of the house that didn't quite close all the way, probably warped from the settling foundation that plagued this whole development. I didn't touch anything, didn't even stop walking, just cataloged the information and filed it away. By the time Jennifer got home with her new haircut, shorter, more styled, the kind of change people make when they're trying to reinvent themselves, I was in the garage organizing my tool bench. She came out to show me, spinning around like we were in some romantic comedy. "What do you think?" she asked. "Looks great," I said, because it did. Because even knowing what I knew, some part of me could still appreciate that she was beautiful, that I'd loved her, that this was all going to get much, much worse before it got better. "You're not even looking," she said, annoyed. I looked up from the socket wrench I'd been pretending to examine, met her eyes directly, smiled. "I said it looks great, Jennifer. It does." Something in my tone made her pause. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, too quick to be sure it had really been there. Then she smiled back and went inside, and I returned to organizing tools I'd organized a dozen times before, thinking about Tyler Monroe's security system and his unlocked side window, and all the ways a person could feel safe when they really weren't. The divorce happened quickly, which surprised everyone except me. Jennifer seemed almost relieved when I suggested it over dinner one random Wednesday, like she'd been waiting for permission to stop pretending. "I think we should separate," I said, passing her the salad bowl. She stared at me for a long moment. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "Why now?" "Because I'm tired," I said, which was true enough. "We're not happy. You know it. I know it." I didn't mention Tyler Monroe. Didn't mention the text messages or the location data or the fact that I'd spent 3 months documenting every lie she'd told. Just kept it simple, kept it clean, let her think this was mutual dissatisfaction rather than calculated endgame. She moved out 6 weeks later. Took half the furniture, half the savings, everything the lawyers said she was entitled to. I didn't fight any of it. Signed everything her attorney put in front of me with barely a question. My own lawyer kept asking if I was sure, if I wanted to push back on the asset division, if I understood what I was giving up. I understood perfectly. What I was giving up was their attention. The divorce finalized in February. Jennifer moved into a rental apartment on the east side. Tyler Monroe's Silverado started appearing in her parking lot overnight. They weren't subtle about it anymore, which told me they'd waited until after the papers were signed. Careful enough to avoid legal complications, careless enough to think I'd stopped paying attention. I hadn't stopped. I'd just stopped being visible. My friends, the few I had, acted concerned in that awkward way people do when they don't know what to say. Tom Henderson called me, the guy whose own divorce I'd witnessed years earlier, and offered to buy me a drink. I declined. My sister flew in from Colorado, stayed for a weekend, and spent the whole time asking if I was okay with an intensity that suggested she thought I might not be. "I'm fine," I kept telling everyone. "It wasn't working. This is better." And I let them believe I was just another divorced guy who'd failed at marriage, quietly nursing his wounds, maybe a little too stoic about the whole thing, but basically handling it fine. Meanwhile, I kept working, kept doing inspections, kept showing up to job sites with my clipboard and my methodical approach to finding problems other people wanted to ignore. Tyler Monroe's office suite conversion was still in progress. He'd corrected the permit violations I'd documented, had to or risk losing his commercial occupancy certificate. But the project had stretched from 6 months to 9. Delays cost money, especially when you're carrying loans on multiple properties. I ran into him once at a hardware store. He was in the plumbing aisle, comparing pipe fittings, and didn't notice me 2 aisles over, watching through the shelving gaps. He looked stressed, thinner than in the photos I'd seen. The kind of thin that comes from pressure, not exercise. Good. I bought what I needed and left before he could see me. No confrontation, no dramatic reveal. Just another Tuesday afternoon errand in a life that had become very, very quiet. Jennifer tried calling a few times in those early months. I let it go to voicemail. She texted asking how I was doing, if we could talk, if I'd considered the possibility that we'd rushed into the divorce. I responded with polite, brief messages that said nothing important. Yes, I was fine. No, I didn't think we should talk. No, I didn't want to reconsider. Each response carefully calibrated to sound like a man who'd moved on. By summer, the calls stopped. The texts became less frequent. Eventually, silence. I bought a new truck that July. Nothing fancy, just a newer model of what I already drove. Took a week of vacation and drove up to Montana. Spent time fly fishing on the Yellowstone River. Came back tan and rested. Posted exactly 3 photos on social media, enough to suggest I was doing fine, not enough to look like I was trying too hard. Everyone commented about how good I looked, how healthy, how they were glad to see me moving forward. I was moving forward, just not in the direction they thought. In August, Tyler Monroe listed one of his rental properties for sale. I saw it on the real estate sites, noted the listing price, compared it to what he'd paid 18 months earlier. He was breaking even at best, maybe taking a small loss after repairs and realtor fees. The kind of financial decision people make when they need liquidity more than they need profit. Interesting. I drove past the property one evening and saw the for sale sign swaying in the wind. 2 other houses on the same street had similar signs. The rental market was softening, and Tyler's timing was bad. Not catastrophic, but bad enough to create pressure. Everything I learned about him suggested pressure was something he didn't handle well. September brought cooler weather and the first hints of fall color in the trees. Jennifer's birthday passed, a date I'd celebrated with her for 7 years, and I didn't acknowledge it. Didn't send a card or a text or even think about her beyond clinical notation. She was data now, a variable in an equation I'd been solving for months. By October, nearly a year after I'd first seen Tyler Monroe's name in our phone records, I'd settled into a routine that looked like acceptance. I worked. I fished. I went to Tom Henderson's kids' baseball games because Tom had kept inviting me, and eventually it seemed easier to just show up. I lived alone in the house Jennifer and I had shared, now redecorated in a minimalist style that suggested I was starting over. I wasn't starting over. I was waiting. People think revenge is hot. They picture rage and confrontation and immediate action. But real revenge is cold, it's patient, It's methodical. It's knowing exactly how long you have to wait before your target forgets you're dangerous. 1 year turned out to be exactly long enough. The text arrived on a Thursday evening while I was replacing a faucet in the guest bathroom. My phone buzzed on the counter, and Jennifer's name appeared on the screen for the first time in 3 months. "We need to talk. Urgently." I stared at the message for a long moment, then went back to tightening the connection nut under the sink. The faucet could wait, but not by much. I'd already shut off the water main, and leaving it off too long would make the neighbors nervous. My phone buzzed again. "Please, it's important." I wiped my hands on a rag, picked up the phone, and typed out a response slowly, carefully, like I was considering her request with genuine thought. "Can't right now. I'm actually on a date." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. "A date? With who?" I let 30 seconds pass, then typed, "Your sister, actually. Amanda's pretty interesting once you get to know her." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 4 times. No message came through. I set the phone down and finished the faucet installation, testing the connections for leaks, making sure everything was properly sealed. When I checked my phone again 15 minutes later, there were no new messages. I hadn't actually been on a date with Amanda. Jennifer's younger sister and I had run into each other at a coffee shop 2 weeks earlier, pure coincidence, and chatted for 20 minutes about nothing important. Amanda was going through her own relationship troubles and seemed grateful to vent to someone who wouldn't report back to Jennifer. But Jennifer didn't know that. All she knew was that her ex-husband had just casually mentioned being on a date with her sister, and that particular piece of information would be burning a hole in her brain right now. Good. My phone rang at 10:30 p.m. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call and went to bed. She called again Friday morning, and Friday afternoon, and Friday evening. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages she left were increasingly agitated, each one asking me to call her back, telling me we needed to talk, insisting that it was urgent. I didn't return any of them. Saturday afternoon, I was grocery shopping when Amanda actually called. I almost didn't answer, hadn't talked to her since that coffee shop conversation, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," I said, balancing the phone against my shoulder while I examined avocados. "Did you really tell Jennifer we were on a date?" Amanda asked. She sounded more amused than angry. I may have implied something to that effect. "She called me 6 times last night. 6. Wanted to know if I was seeing you, if we'd been talking, if I was trying to betray the family. Her words, not mine." "Sorry about that," I said, though I wasn't. "She texted me out of nowhere asking to talk. I wasn't interested." Amanda laughed. "Well, you definitely got her attention. She's losing it. Kept asking why I would do this to her, like I'm actually dating you behind her back." "Are we?" I asked, just to see what she'd say. There was a pause. "Your trouble? You know that?" "I've been told." "Jennifer also mentioned something about Tyler," Amanda said, her tone shifting slightly. "Said he's having some kind of business problem and that's why she needed to talk to you. Something about permits or inspections." I stopped examining avocados. "What kind of problem?" "She didn't give details, just said he might need to talk to someone at the city, and since you work there..." Amanda trailed off. "Wait, is Tyler that guy she was seeing?" "Allegedly." "Jesus. So she wants you to help the guy she cheated with?" "Sounds like it." Amanda let out a low whistle. "That's incredibly messed up, even for Jennifer." "Did she say anything else?" I asked. "Yeah, actually. She mentioned something about an investor pulling out. Said Tyler was supposed to close on some big deal, but it fell through because of compliance issues. She was pretty worked up about it." "An investor," I repeated. "Some real estate group that was going to partner with him on a commercial project. Jennifer said they did a background check and found red flags with the city. Now they want nothing to do with him." I felt something warm settle in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, but close. That's unfortunate. Is it, though? Amanda asked. Because you sound like you're smiling. I'm not smiling. Liar. What did you do? Nothing. I just inspect buildings. Right. And I'm sure those inspections have nothing to do with Tyler losing his investor. Correlation isn't causation, I said. Amanda was quiet for a moment. You know what? Good. He deserves it. Jennifer too, honestly. She's been acting like she upgraded when she left you. Like Tyler was this big catch. Now she's realizing he's a mess. She tell you that? Not directly. But she's been asking me a lot of questions lately. About you. About whether you're seeing anyone. Whether you seem happy. What did you tell her? That you seem great. Better than when you were married, actually. That seemed to really bother her. We talked for a few more minutes, Amanda filling me in on the family gossip I'd missed since the divorce. Apparently Jennifer had been presenting Tyler as a serious boyfriend at family gatherings, bringing him to dinners, introducing him to the relatives, making it official, which meant his problems were becoming her problems. Oh, and one more thing, Amanda said before we hung up. Mom wants to invite you to Thanksgiving. She feels bad about how everything went down. That's nice of her, but I told her you'd probably say no. But I think you should consider it, just to mess with Jennifer. I laughed despite myself. You're evil. I learned from watching Family Dynamics. Think about it, though. It would be hilarious. After I hung up with Amanda, I sat in my truck in the grocery store parking lot and thought about what this meant. An investor backing out because of compliance concerns. That wasn't just the variance denial. That was someone doing due diligence and finding a pattern of violations serious enough to make them walk away from a deal. I pulled up the city's permit database on my phone and searched for Tyler Monroe's current projects. The office suite conversion had passed final inspection 3 weeks ago. His rental property had sold in early September. Everything appeared normal on paper. But then I checked the zoning board meeting minutes, something I did routinely as part of my job, and found something interesting. Tyler had submitted a variance request for his largest property, the one he hadn't sold, asking to convert it from residential to mixed-use commercial. The kind of conversion that would significantly increase its value and rental income potential. The variance request had been denied 2 weeks ago. I scrolled through the meeting notes. The denial wasn't based on zoning incompatibility or neighborhood opposition. It was based on incomplete documentation and concerns about the applicant's compliance history with existing permits. My concerns. Documented carefully over the past year. Filed through proper channels by an inspector who'd noticed patterns of corner cutting and code violations. Nothing personal. Nothing vindictive. Just facts, presented objectively, that happened to paint Tyler Monroe as exactly the kind of contractor the zoning board didn't want to approve for expanded commercial operations. I started the truck and drove home, the groceries forgotten in the parking lot. Sunday morning, Jennifer tried a different approach. Instead of calling or texting, she sent an email. Professional sounding, like she was writing to a colleague rather than her ex-husband. I understand you're upset about what happened between us. I take full responsibility for my mistakes. However, Tyler's business difficulties are affecting more than just him. He employs 3 people who will lose their jobs if this situation isn't resolved. I'm asking you, as someone who used to care about doing the right thing, to reconsider helping with the zoning appeal. We're not asking for special treatment, just fairness. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Fairness. She wanted to talk about fairness. That evening, I finally responded to Jennifer's texts. Talk to Amanda. She mentioned Tyler's having some trouble. What's that about? The response came within 30 seconds. Can we please talk? In person? No. Please. I know you're angry, but this is business. Tyler needs help with a zoning issue, and I thought maybe you could... I didn't let her finish. I'm not helping Tyler with anything. It's not like that. It's just advice. Professional consultation. We'd pay you. I stared at that message for a long moment. They'd pay me to help fix the problems I'd created. The audacity was almost impressive. Not interested, I typed. You're being petty. I'm being divorced, I replied. We're not married. We're not friends. I don't owe you or Tyler anything. He didn't do anything to you. That message sat on my screen, begging for the response it deserved. But I didn't take the bait. Instead, I wrote, "Have a good weekend, Jennifer." My phone rang immediately. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Why are you doing this?" Jennifer's voice was tight, controlled. "Doing what?" "You know exactly what. The inspections, the reports, the variance denial, you're sabotaging him. I'm enforcing building codes. You're being vindictive." "Those are your words, not mine." "He's going to lose everything," she said, and her voice cracked slightly. 3 years of work, gone, because you can't let go of what happened between us." "What happened between us," I repeated slowly, "is that you decided to start seeing someone else while we were married. I didn't sabotage anything. I discovered it, divorced you, and moved on. What's happening with Tyler's business has nothing to do with that." "Then why are all his properties suddenly failing inspections?" "Because they have violations, real ones, the kind that put tenants at risk." "Violations you're looking for specifically?" "Violations that exist regardless of whether I look for them or not." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Then, "I made a mistake. With us. I know that now, but punishing Tyler won't change what happened. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm doing my job." "Your job didn't require you to inspect every single property he owns." "Actually, it did. Once I found violations on the first property, protocol requires checking any related properties owned by the same contractor. It's called pattern recognition. We look for systemic issues." "That's convenient." "That's procedure. If you don't believe me, file a complaint with my supervisor. His name's Gerald Patterson." "Tyler already did that. Your supervisor said everything was by the book." "Because it is." "So you're just going to keep doing this? Destroying his business? Making it impossible for him to work?" "I'm going to keep enforcing codes, yes. Whether that destroys his business or not isn't my concern." "God, you're cold." "I prefer thorough." She hung up without saying anything else. I set the phone down and made myself dinner. Grilled chicken and roasted vegetables, eaten slowly while I reviewed the notes I'd been keeping for the past year. Every permit Tyler had filed, every violation I'd documented, every connection between his business operations and the various pressure points I'd been carefully, methodically applying. None of it illegal. None of it provable as targeted harassment. Just a building inspector doing his job with exceptional thoroughness on projects that happened to involve the man sleeping with his ex-wife. My phone lit up throughout the evening. More texts from Jennifer, each one escalating from pleading to anger to desperation. I didn't read them, didn't need to. The pattern was clear. Tyler's variance denial was threatening something bigger. Maybe a loan that depended on the increased property value. Maybe an investor who'd promised funding conditional on the commercial conversion. Maybe both. Whatever it was time sensitive. And they thought I was the solution. They were wrong about that. I was the problem they'd finally noticed. Monday morning, I got to the office early and reviewed Tyler Monroe's entire permit history one more time. Every project he'd completed, every inspection he'd passed, every variance he'd requested, looking for the pressure point that would hurt most. I found it in a residential project from 2 years ago, before Jennifer, before any of this started. Tyler had converted a duplex into apartments, cutting corners on the fire suppression system in a way that had technically passed inspection, but only because the inspector at the time had been rushed and missed the details. That inspector had retired last year. His files were now part of my rotation. I scheduled a random fire safety audit for that property, completely routine. The city did them periodically, especially on rental properties, and Tyler's duplex was overdue. The audit happened Wednesday afternoon. I showed up with a checklist and a camera, documented 17 violations ranging from blocked exits to improperly rated fire doors to smoke detectors that weren't up to current code. The tenants, a young couple and an elderly woman, were cooperative but concerned when I explained they'd need to vacate for at least a week while repairs were made. "Is it dangerous?" the elderly woman asked, her voice shaking slightly. "The violations need to be corrected," I said carefully. "I wouldn't call it immediately dangerous, but these systems exist for a reason. If there was a fire, the current setup wouldn't meet safety standards." The young couple exchanged worried looks. "And we have to leave?" "Until the repairs are made and pass re-inspection, yes. The property owner should be providing alternative accommodations or refunding rent for the displacement period." "Tyler's going to be pissed," the young man said. "Tyler needs to maintain his properties properly," I replied, handing them a copy of the violation notice. "This isn't optional." Tyler called me directly 2 hours later. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I answered and heard his voice, I almost smiled. "This is Tyler Monroe. I own the property at 847 Belmont. You were there today?" "Correct," I said. "Fire safety audit. The results are being sent to your registered business address." "I got the preliminary notice. This is insane. 17 violations? That property passed inspection 2 years ago." "Codes change," I said calmly. "And previous oversights don't exempt current violations. This is going to cost me 15 grand to fix, at least." "Probably more like 20, I said, reviewing my notes. "The fire suppression system needs a complete overhaul." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Who are you?" "I'm the inspector assigned to your properties. My name's on the report." "No, I mean—" He paused. "Have we met before?" "I don't believe so." "You sure? Because this feels personal." I let the silence hang for a moment. "Mr. Monroe, I inspect dozens of properties every week. There's nothing personal about code compliance. If you'd like to dispute the findings, there's an appeal process outlined in the documentation." "I know the appeal process. It takes months." "Usually 3 to 4, I agreed. "You'll need to hire a licensed fire safety contractor to draft remediation plans, submit them for review, and schedule a re-inspection once the work is complete. The tenants will need to remain displaced until we verify compliance. This is going to destroy my cash flow." "That's unfortunate," I said, and meant it in the way you mean condolences at a funeral for someone you didn't like. "But safety violations need to be addressed. Look, can we talk about this? Maybe I can prioritize some of the fixes and phase the rest. All violations need to be corrected before I can issue a compliance certificate. There's no phase system for fire safety." He started to argue. I interrupted. "Mr. Monroe, I have another inspection in 20 minutes. If you have concerns about the findings, file an appeal. Otherwise, hire a contractor and fix the problems. Have a good day." I hung up before he could respond. That evening, I drove past Tyler's townhouse. His Silverado was parked in the driveway, and I could see lights on inside. I didn't stop, just noted the time, and kept driving to a site I actually needed to inspect, a restaurant renovation on the north side. The inspection took an hour. When I finished, I took the long way home, which happened to pass by Jennifer's apartment complex. Her car was there. So was Tyler's Silverado, parked in the spot next to hers that had probably been designated as guest parking, but clearly served as his secondary space. I pulled into the lot and parked 3 spaces down, engine running, watching the building. Their apartment was on the 2nd floor, 4th window from the left. The lights were on. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. They were probably talking about me right now, about the fire safety audit and the zoning variance denial and how none of this made sense because they'd been so careful to keep everything legal. They had been careful. That was the beautiful part. Everything I'd done was absolutely legal, too. I sat there for 20 minutes, Not for any strategic reason, but simply because I wanted them to know I could. Wanted Tyler to look out the window and see an unfamiliar truck in the parking lot and wonder if it meant something. Wanted Jennifer to feel the kind of low-grade anxiety that comes from realizing your ex-husband knows where you live and isn't pretending to forget anymore. Then I drove home, parked in my garage, and spent the next 2 hours in my workshop building a shadow box frame for a photo I'd taken in Montana. The kind of normal evening activity that kept me grounded while everything else accelerated. Thursday morning, Tyler's Silverado was in the parking lot of a coffee shop I sometimes visited before work. I knew this because I'd installed a GPS tracker under his rear bumper 3 days ago, the magnetic kind people use for fleet vehicles, completely legal to purchase and only slightly illegal to deploy without consent. The tracker had cost me $65 and gave me real-time updates on his location. He was usually at job sites during the day, at Jennifer's at night, at the gym early mornings. Predictable routine. The kind of routine that creates opportunities. I watched those patterns for the rest of the week, noting when he was where, how long he stayed, who he met with, building a schedule more detailed than his own calendar probably contained. Saturday evening, Tyler's truck was parked outside a bar on the east side, a place called Hannigan's that catered to the contractor crowd. All work boots and flannel shirts and conversations about lumber prices. I'd been there a few times myself, back when Jennifer and I were still married, and I'd occasionally meet Tom Henderson for beers after work. I walked in at 9 p.m. and found Tyler at the bar, 2 stools from the end, nursing what looked like a whiskey. He was alone, shoulders hunched, the posture of someone carrying stress they couldn't set down. I took the stool next to him and ordered a beer. He glanced over, did a double take, then stared. "You," he said. "Evening," I replied. "What are you doing here?" "Having a beer, same as you." He looked around like he was checking for witnesses or backup. "This is harassment. It's a public bar. I'm off duty. If you're uncomfortable, you're welcome to leave." He didn't leave. Instead, he turned to face me fully, his expression hardening into something that might have been intimidating if I hadn't spent the past year learning exactly how hollow his confidence was. "I know what you're doing," he said quietly. "Drinking beer? The inspections, the violations, the variance denial. You think I don't know who you are?" "I know exactly who I am," I said. "I'm a city building inspector doing my job." "You're Jennifer's ex-husband." "Also true." "And you're targeting me because—" He stopped, apparently realizing he couldn't finish that sentence without admitting why I might want to. "Because your projects keep having code violations?" I suggested. "Yeah, that's generally how inspections work. Those violations are garbage, and you know it." I took a long drink of my beer, set it down carefully. "Mr. Monroe, if you want to dispute any findings, file an appeal. If you want to complain about my conduct, contact my supervisor. His name's Gerald Patterson, office numbers on every report I file." "I'm not filing complaints. I'm telling you to back off." "Or what?" The question hung there. Tyler opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Or I'll make this complicated for you." "How?" "I have connections at City Hall. People who'll listen when I explain what you're doing." "Please do," I said. "Ask for Gerald. He'll pull my inspection history and show you that I document violations on dozens of properties every month. Yours just happen to have more than most." "Because you're looking harder." "Because you cut corners," I corrected. "That duplex fire safety system? That's been a problem for 2 years. You're lucky no one got hurt." "It passed inspection." "It passed a bad inspection. I'm fixing that mistake." Tyler's jaw tightened. "You can't do this. I'll hire a lawyer. I'll sue you for abuse of power, for anything." "That's your right," I said, "though I'd advise saving the legal fees for fixing your properties instead. But that's just professional advice." I finished my beer, stood up, and pulled out my wallet, left a 20 on the bar. Good luck with the repairs, I said. And tell Jennifer I hope her sister's doing well. I walked out before he could respond, got in my truck, and drove away feeling more alive than I had in months. Because that was the moment Tyler Monroe realized he couldn't intimidate me. Couldn't buy me off. Couldn't make this go away with lawyers or connections or whatever other tools he usually deployed when life got difficult. He was trapped in a system I knew better than he did, being crushed by rules I enforced more carefully than anyone else in the department. And the best part was, it was all completely legal. The bar confrontation worked exactly the way I'd hoped. Tyler panicked. And when people panic, they make mistakes. Monday morning, I got a call from Gerald Patterson, my supervisor, asking me to stop by his office. Gerald was 63, counting down to retirement, and generally uninterested in drama. If Tyler had called him to complain, Gerald would have listened politely and then buried the complaint under procedural delays until everyone forgot about it. Got a call from some contractor, Gerald said when I walked in. Tyler Monroe says you're targeting his properties. Am I? I asked. Gerald pulled up my inspection history on his computer, scrolled through the records. You've flagged 11 Monroe properties in the past 8 months. Sounds about right. That's a lot of attention for one contractor. That's a lot of properties with problems, I said. Pull the violation details. Everything I documented was legitimate. Gerald scrolled further, read some of the reports, checked the photos I'd attached, finally leaned back in his chair and shrugged. They're legit, he agreed. Monroe's just mad because you're thorough. He's mad because he's losing money. Not our problem. Keep doing what you're doing, just make sure your documentation stays airtight. If this guy's going to complain, I want zero ammunition for him to use. Understood. I left Gerald's office and went back to work, knowing Tyler had just made his first serious mistake. He'd tried to use official channels to stop me, and it had failed, which meant he'd escalate to unofficial ones. The escalation came Wednesday evening. I was at a gas station filling my truck when Tyler's Silverado pulled in 2 pumps over. He got out, looked directly at me, and walked over. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't. Jennifer's not handling this well. I kept watching the gas pump numbers climb. Not my problem. You're being vindictive. It's pathetic. I'm enforcing building codes. The fact that you're taking it personally says more about you than me. I know what you're really doing, Tyler said, his voice dropping. And it's not going to work. Jennifer and I are fine. Actually, we're better than fine. We're talking about moving in together officially, getting engaged. I finally looked at him. Congratulations. You don't care? Why would I? That seemed to throw him. He'd expected jealousy, anger, some kind of emotional reaction he could leverage. Instead, I gave him nothing. Because she was your wife, he said, was being the operative word. So, this isn't about her? This isn't about anything. You have code violations. I documented them. Fix your properties and we'll never have to interact again. What about the variance denial? That was the zoning board, not me. Based on your reports. Based on your compliance history, I corrected. Which you created, not me. Tyler stepped closer. Listen to me very carefully. You need to stop this. Write some kind of retraction. Clear my record. Tell the zoning board they made a mistake. Or what? Or I'll make you regret it. I turned to face him fully, and something in my expression made him take a step back. No, I said quietly. You won't. Because if you come near me again outside of official business, if you threaten me again, if you do anything except fix your properties and leave me alone, I'll make sure every single inspection I conduct on your projects for the rest of your career is so thorough it'll take you 3 times longer and cost twice as much to complete anything. That's abuse of power. That's dedication to public safety. And you won't be able to prove otherwise because everything I document will be real. You cut corners, I notice. That's how this works. The gas pump clicked off. I removed the nozzle, replaced it, and got in my truck. Tyler stood there in the gas station parking lot, watching me drive away, and I knew from his expression that he was finally understanding the situation he was in. This wasn't going to end with a conversation or a threat or a lawyer. This was going to end when I decided it ended. That night, Jennifer called me again. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was 20 seconds of her trying to explain that Tyler was just stressed, that the business problems weren't my fault, that she hoped we could all move past this like adults. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. Thursday, I ran into Amanda again, this time at a grocery store, completely by accident. She was buying wine and frozen pizza, the dinner of someone who'd given up on cooking. "You're causing quite a stir," she said. "Am I?" "Jennifer called our mother, told her you were harassing Tyler, that she was worried about your mental state, that the divorce had made you unstable." "Interesting theory. Is it true? That I'm harassing someone?" "No." "That the divorce affected me?" "Sure." "That I'm unstable?" I shrugged. "You tell me." Amanda studied me for a moment. "You seem pretty stable. Actually, you seem better than you did when you were married." "That's because I am." "So, what's really going on?" I considered how much to tell her. Amanda had always been the reasonable one in Jennifer's family, the one who called out nonsense when she saw it. And she'd been kind to me during the divorce, not taking sides, staying neutral. "Your sister's boyfriend has code violations on his properties," I said. "I documented them. That's my job. If she wants to interpret that as harassment, that's her choice." "But you knew it would cause problems for him." "Yes." "And you did it anyway." "Yes." Amanda was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. "Okay, I can respect that. He seemed like a tool when I met him." "He is. Jennifer's going to lose it when she realizes you're not going to stop." "Probably. You know this is going to get messy." "It already is," I said. "But messiness requires two people who care about each other's opinions. I stopped caring about Jennifer's opinion last year." Amanda picked up her wine and frozen pizza. "For what it's worth, I think she knows she messed up, not that she'd ever admit it. Doesn't matter if she admits it or not." "Wow, you really are over her." "Completely," I said, and realized it was true. Somewhere in the past year, while I'd been methodically dismantling Tyler Monroe's business operations, I'd stopped thinking of Jennifer as someone I'd loved and started thinking of her as a problem I'd already solved. The divorce had been the solution. Everything else was just cleanup. Amanda left with her wine and pizza, and I finished my shopping alone, thinking about how strange it was that revenge could feel this calm. No rage, no passion, no dramatic confrontations. Just steady, methodical pressure applied to all the right weak points until the structure collapsed. Friday evening, Tyler's variance appeal was officially rejected. I saw the notice in the zoning board meeting minutes, filed with the city, public record, final decision. No path forward for converting his residential property to commercial use, which meant whatever financial plans he'd built around that conversion were now impossible. I had a beer to celebrate, sitting on my back porch watching the sunset, knowing that somewhere across town, Tyler was having a much worse evening. Saturday. Jennifer showed up at my house. I saw her car pull into the driveway through the window and considered not answering when she knocked. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what she thought she could accomplish by showing up in person. She looked tired when I opened the door, like she hadn't slept well in days. Good. "Can I come in?" she asked. "No. Please. We need to talk." "So you've said, multiple times." "Face to face. That's all I'm asking." I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me, leaned against the frame. "You've got 5 minutes. Tyler's business is falling apart because of you. Because of code violations. That you're targeting him with. That he created by doing shoddy work," I corrected. "Jennifer, I don't write the building codes. I just enforce them. If Tyler had done things right the first time, none of this would be happening. You're enjoying this. I'm indifferent to it. Liar. You're trying to ruin him because of me. I'm not trying to ruin anyone. But if Tyler's business can't survive basic code compliance, that suggests he was never running a sustainable operation to begin with. Jennifer's expression hardened. He could lose everything. That's unfortunate. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say? That I'll back off? That I'll pretend his properties are fine when they're not? I won't do that. Even for me? The question hung in the air between us. Even for me. Like we still had some kind of connection that would override professional obligations and personal boundaries and the basic fact that she'd destroyed our marriage. Especially for you, I said. She flinched like I'd struck her. I made a mistake. I know that now. Tyler and I, it's not what I thought it would be. He's stressed all the time, obsessed with money, paranoid about his business. It's exhausting. Sounds rough. I'm trying to apologize. No, you're trying to manipulate me into helping Tyler. There's a difference. I still care about you. You should have thought about that before you started whatever you and Tyler were doing while we were married. Jennifer went very still. You knew? For about a year now. But you didn't say anything. You just divorced me. What was I supposed to say? You'd already made your choice. I just made mine. That's why you're doing this. This whole thing with Tyler. It's revenge. No, I said. This whole thing with Tyler is code enforcement. Revenge would be personal. This is professional. That's a distinction without a difference. Not legally. She stared at me, and I could see her trying to find the angle, the approach that would make me relent. She'd always been good at that, finding the soft spots in people's arguments and pressing until they gave her what she wanted. But I didn't have soft spots anymore, not where she was concerned. Please, she finally said, and her voice cracked slightly. I'm asking you to stop. And I'm telling you I won't. Fix the properties, Jennifer. Follow the codes. It's that simple. It's not simple. The repairs cost money Tyler doesn't have. The variance denial tanked his commercial deal. He's going to have to sell everything just to break even. Then he should probably start selling. I opened the door behind me. We're done here, I said. Wait. No. Get off my property, and tell Tyler if he shows up here, I'm calling the police. I went inside and closed the door, locked it, and watched through the window as Jennifer stood on my porch for another 30 seconds before walking back to her car. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time, probably crying or fuming or some combination of both. I didn't care which. When she finally drove away, I returned to my evening, made dinner, watched a movie, went to bed at a reasonable hour. The confrontation had been inevitable, and now it was finished. No more questions about whether I knew. No more pretending we were just two people who drifted apart. She knew I knew. And she knew I wasn't going to stop. The only question left was how far she'd let Tyler fall before she cut him loose. Tyler Monroe filed for bankruptcy on a Tuesday morning in mid-November. I found out from the public records database, the same place I'd been monitoring his property transactions for months. Chapter 11, Business Reorganization, intended to consolidate debts and keep some operations running while liquidating others. It was a desperate move that would buy him time but solve nothing. The bankruptcy filing was public information, which meant everyone in the contracting community would know about it by the end of the day. His reputation, already damaged by the variance denial and the mounting code violations, was now officially toxic. No one gives contracts to broke contractors. I was at a coffee shop when I saw the filing, sitting by the window with my tablet, scrolling through the morning's updates like I did every day. Tom Henderson walked in, spotted me, and came over. "Did you hear?" he asked. "Hear what?" "That property flipper, Tyler Monroe, filed for bankruptcy. Guy's completely underwater." "That's unfortunate," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Word is, he had a bunch of rental properties with code violations that cost him everything. Someone at the city was really riding him hard on inspections." Sounds like he should have built things to code. Tom looked at me for a long moment. You know something about this? I know I do my job. If Monroe's properties ended up on my inspection list and they had problems, I documented them, same as I do with everyone else. But did you maybe look a little closer at his stuff than you normally would? Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe his stuff just had more problems than most. Tom sat down across from me, uninvited. Is this about Jennifer? No, it's about sloppy construction work that put tenants at risk. But you're not sorry it happened? I considered the question. Was I sorry Tyler Monroe's business had collapsed? Sorry he'd filed for bankruptcy? Sorry he was probably going to lose everything he'd built over the past 5 years? No, I said. I'm not sorry. Tom nodded slowly. Good. He had it coming. We drank our coffee in silence for a while. Then Tom said, She left him, you know. Who? Jennifer left Tyler. Moved back in with her parents last week. That was news. Interesting news, though not surprising. Jennifer had always been practical about relationships. Once Tyler became a liability instead of an asset, of course, she'd cut him loose. How do you know this? I asked. My ex-wife is friends with Jennifer's cousin. The gossip network still functions even after divorce. Does Jennifer know about Tyler's bankruptcy? Probably not yet. Filing just happened this morning, but she will soon. I imagined Jennifer's reaction, the shock, the anger, the inevitable realization that she'd tied herself to a sinking ship and abandoned a stable marriage in the process. Not that I'd been perfect, but I'd been reliable. I'd paid the bills. I'd never once put her in a position where she had to move back in with her parents at 34 years old. Must be a tough week for her, I said. Must be, Tom agreed. Then he grinned. You really did a number on this guy. I enforced building codes. Right. And I'm sure it was all completely coincidental that every property he owned ended up on your inspection list. Not coincidental, I said. Strategic. Tom laughed. Man, remind me never to make you angry. You didn't sleep with my wife, you're fine. We finished our coffee. Tom left to get to a job site, and I stayed at the window table, watching people walk past on the sidewalk, thinking about how a year ago I'd been sitting in my truck outside Tyler Monroe's construction project, writing down permit numbers and planning how to make his life difficult. It had worked better than I'd expected. That evening, I got a text from Amanda. Did you hear about Tyler? I replied, Yep. Jennifer's freaking out. Says he lied about his finances, that she had no idea things were this bad. She probably didn't. People like Tyler are good at maintaining appearances. She wants to talk to you again. Not interested. I figured. Just giving you a heads up in case she shows up. Thanks. I set the phone down and made dinner, half expecting Jennifer to appear at my door like she had the previous week. But the evening passed quietly. No car in the driveway, no knock at the door, just me and a reheated casserole and a documentary about deep-sea fishing. Around 9 p.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. This is Tyler Monroe. His voice was tight, controlled, barely containing rage. Evening, I said. You destroyed my business. No, you destroyed your business by cutting corners on fire safety systems and building code compliance. I just noticed. 16 violations. In 8 months. On properties that had been fine for years. They were never fine. They just hadn't been inspected properly. You targeted me. I inspected you. There's a difference. Because of Jennifer. Because of the violations I found during routine inspections. Your relationship with my ex-wife is irrelevant. Irrelevant, Tyler repeated, and laughed bitterly. You ruined me over a woman who doesn't even care about you anymore. I didn't ruin you. The market ruined you. Your own poor planning ruined you. I just did my job. You think you're clever? Think you got away with it? I think I enforced building codes and prevented unsafe conditions in rental properties. If you want to view that as persecution, that's your problem. You're a vindictive piece of... I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I declined the call. It rang 3 more times over the next hour. I ignored all of them. Eventually, the calls stopped and were replaced by a series of text messages, each one angrier than the last, accusing me of everything from professional misconduct to harassment to ruining his life. I saved them all, just in case, but I didn't respond to any of them. There was nothing left to say. Tyler Monroe's business was bankrupt. His relationship with Jennifer was over. His reputation in the contracting community was shredded, and none of it could be traced back to anything except his own poor construction practices and the routine enforcement of building codes. I'd won, completely, quietly, legally, and that should have felt better than it did. I spent the rest of November finishing up end-of-year inspections and filing the last of my violation reports. Tyler's name appeared in the database a few more times, properties going into foreclosure, liens being filed, contractors demanding payment for work he couldn't afford. The systematic dismantling of everything he'd built. Jennifer called once, 2 weeks before Christmas. I answered because Amanda had warned me she might try again, and I figured it was better to deal with it directly than let it drag out. "Hey," Jennifer said when I picked up. Her voice was subdued, none of the anger from previous conversations. "Hey. I just wanted to say, I know what happened with Tyler, with his business. I know you were behind it." "I was behind code enforcement, that's all." "Right, code enforcement." She paused. "You must be happy." "I'm satisfied," I said, which was more honest than I'd planned to be. He lost everything. "So did I when you decided to start seeing him. Difference is, I rebuilt. He won't." "That's cold." "That's reality. You made choices, Jennifer. He made choices. I just responded to them. By destroying him. By making sure rental properties in this city meet basic safety standards. If that destroyed him, he wasn't stable to begin with." There was a long silence. Then, "I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did to us. For..." "Jennifer," I interrupted. "I don't need your apology. We're done. Have been for a year. This isn't about us anymore. It never really was." "Then what was it about?" I thought about that. About the year I'd spent documenting violations and filing reports and watching Tyler Monroe's empire crumble piece by piece. About the satisfaction I'd felt each time another property failed inspection. About the quiet, methodical pleasure of watching someone who thought they'd gotten away with something realize they'd been caught all along. "It was about making sure there were consequences," I said. "That's all." "Well, there were. Tyler's gone. Our relationship's over. I'm living with my parents. Are you happy now?" "I'm content." "You're scary," she said quietly. "You know that? The way you just systematically took him apart. It's terrifying." "Then don't give me a reason to do it again." I hung up before she could respond. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone, which was fine. Made dinner, watched movies, called my sister in Colorado, and pretended everything was normal. She asked if I was seeing anyone. I said no. She asked if I was okay. I said yes. Both answers were true. New Year's Eve. I found myself back at Hannigan's, the bar where I'd confronted Tyler months earlier. The place was crowded with contractors and construction workers celebrating the end of the year, drinking cheap beer and telling stories about job sites gone wrong. I ordered a whiskey and sat at the end of the bar, watching people laugh and argue and live their lives without knowing anything about building codes or revenge, or how easily a person's world can be dismantled if someone knows where to look. A woman 2 stools over smiled at me. She was mid-30s, dark hair, wearing jeans and a sweater that suggested she worked somewhere professional, but wasn't pretentious about it. "You here alone?" she asked. "For now." "Rough year? Complicated year?" Fair enough. She raised her glass. To complicated years ending. I raised mine and clinked it against hers. To starting fresh. We talked for an hour. Her name was Caroline. She was a physical therapist at one of the hospitals, recently moved to town, knew nobody, thought New Year's Eve alone at a bar sounded depressing, so she'd forced herself to go out. She was funny and smart and had no connection to Jennifer or Tyler or any of the past year's complications. "What do you do?" she asked eventually. "I'm a building inspector." That sounds thorough. It can be. So you're detail-oriented, type A personality, the kind of person who can't let things go until they're done right? Something like that, I admitted. Caroline smiled. I like thorough. We exchanged numbers before the night ended, made plans to get coffee the following week. She left with a group of friends, and I stayed at the bar for one more drink, watching the crowd count down to midnight on the television above the bar. 10, 9, 8. A year ago, I'd been sitting in my house, married to Jennifer, unaware that everything was about to fall apart, unaware that I was being betrayed, unaware that the next 12 months would fundamentally change who I was and what I was capable of. 7, 6, 5. Now I was someone who'd methodically destroyed another person's livelihood using nothing but legal tools and patience. Someone who'd taken satisfaction in watching Tyler Monroe's world collapse. Someone who'd felt nothing when Jennifer called crying. 4, 3, 2. I was either the villain of this story or the hero, depending on perspective, and I'd stopped caring which. 1. The bar erupted in cheers. People hugged and kissed and toasted the new year. I finished my whiskey, left cash on the bar, and walked out into the cold January night. Tyler Monroe's Silverado was parked across the street, engine running, Tyler behind the wheel watching the bar entrance, watching me. We made eye contact. I could see his face in the streetlight, haggard, exhausted, hollow. A man who'd lost everything and was trying to figure out what came next. I raised my hand in acknowledgement, not a wave, not a taunt, just recognition.